Hello and welcome, it's a new video. Today we're looking at the different bodies I've designed for my dragon game. I'd like to break down how I make some of my characters, so I basically will just show you a few different methods that I use. The first one is using a web-based software called Monster Mash, and it will let you trace a drawing, a flat illustration, with a click of a button. It will puff it out, and it uses some kind of algorithm to make your character. And you have to separate out the legs, the head, the ears and the wings. And I really like it. I don't know if I'm going to go with this style. It's one of three-ish that I've got, but I really like it as an effect, and it's quite cool as a really quick way of making a model. If you're new to modeling, or if you just like this kind of inflated aesthetic, it works really quickly. You can see it get really puffy in all different angles, and I just think it's really cute. But it is a very specific style. I really like the puffy wings, and I really quite like the ear as well. The singular ear. I think it looks really good and it works really well. And I've just added a very purpley red colour for the wings. Slightly darker than the body. As yet, I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to design onto my characters for my dragons in terms of, decals or, special graphics or anything like that, as it's still early days. I have a few ideas, but compared to dragons that are seen in a lot of other games, they're much smoother. They don't have loads of scaly details or anything sticking out like that. I just prefer the smoother kind of design, in part because I'm imagining them as toys that can be made real, and for manufacturing, obviously, smoother details are better. Let me know if you like that idea, making them into, physical toys. So they don't have lots of additional adornments or anything as standard. I might add some, but for now they're just smooth bodies, heads, wings, everything. I'm just showing some of the geometry, which is made up of triangles. So that's kind of, geometry is like a Blender term or a 3D modeling term, which just tells you that the object that you've made is constructed of primitive shapes, so normally triangles or squares. So I'm going to clean this up when I make my next steps, when I start to animate, but for now it's really just about kind of getting a basic body block that I can work with. So that's model number 1, and then dragon number 2 on the list. Let's find him. So what I like about dragon number 2 is his head was made using Adobe Illustrator. So I just traced around his head, outlined the ear, the eyes and the nose, and then I used Inflate in Illustrator to make his head, and it's still quite thick and stocky. And I haven't split out his ears yet, and I might well need to do a bit more refinement on his head. But overall, I really like this aesthetic, and I feel like it carries my illustration style really well, which is one of the main things that I'm passionate about, is keeping my 2D illustration style present when I 3D model. It still manages to maintain it, which is great, and it's one of the things I really wanted. That hand-drawn aesthetic. It's 2D, now let's make it 3D. The body was made in Blender, and again, I've just traced around the outline of the drawing that I made to give it this kind of sick character body look. And then I'm using the mirror modifier to make it double-sided, so what you get on one side, you get on the other. And I'd just like to refine him a bit more, maybe make him a bit skinnier in some places, because he's quite consistently thick all over. So maybe his neck should come in a bit, or whatever, or his waist. I do think overall he might be slightly too square, so it's just, how can I make him look less square? Or maybe you like that look, or maybe you think the puffy dragon is better, that's kind of chunky in lots of different ways. I've used the wings from Monster Mash on this model, so he doesn't have super square wings. I haven't actually tried to use super square wings yet, so that could be a future option. What I mean by super square is drawing something either in Blender or Illustrator onto a plane, and then extruding it or solidifying it to thick it out, and you get this thick block that has no real curvature to it, which is great for wings because that's kind of how they are. They're quite flat. So that could be a future option, but I do quite like the puffy style of wing. I think it works really well in a contrast with I think it works really well in a contrast. And what I like most of all about this character is just the sophistication of the legs. They're quite slender, long, and kind of, shall we say, aesthetic, which is what I keep saying throughout this video. Then we've got dragon number 3. He's a bit thicker in the back because after I made the blender body, I thought that it was too square. So I started using the inflate tool again in sculpt mode in Blender. I've mentioned it a few times, but pretty much every single program, whether that's Monster Mash, Illustrator, Blender, have some form of inflate to make the body or the head or whatever a bit more puffy. Monster Mash and Illustrator to me are like cheat codes for modeling because you just draw something out and it algorithmically figures out the 3D-ness of it. Whereas with Blender, you have to sculpt to pretty much get what you want. So it's kind of up to you. I've been using Blender for a few years now, but I really like mixing and matching the different styles to get quick models made that I can then refine in Blender afterwards. But it just cuts down on a lot of modeling time for me, which is why I like using Illustrator and Monster Mash. I'm giving it a 3D dimension. Also for this character, I added some really straightforward cones on the top of the head, just to see what it would look like with a few more dragony features. I really find the underside appealing. I don't know why, that smoothness, it's very liquidy. And I've put a shade smooth modifier on here, which is a standard thing in Blender that you can use to see how your model would look if it had a silky smooth surface, that rather than it just being made up of triangles or squares. And again, he's got the inset eyes I just love, the nose, and then the kind of puffy wings as well. And then lastly, possibly my favorite, it's so cute, is little puffy boy, little baby dragon. I think I realized I missed out on an eye here, so I'm just using a mirror modifier to bring it back so that he isn't a single-sided dragon or a single-eyed dragon, although that could be a thing. And again, you can see here that he's monster mashed, and he's got like a puffy body, puffy wings, puffy ears, puffy everything. And I managed to get it right, and I gave him 2 ears this time instead of the standard one. I haven't decided if they should have tails or not, so you can let me know what you think about that. Obviously, he could have a short little stubby tail, or he could have a really long curly tail, or a forked tail, or a bushy tail even. And ultimately, yeah, I just think that they look really cute as first early designs with not a ton of detail at all. And I'll next show you the other variants of the baby dragon that I've got. They're all kind of similar. Again, it's just that I've used different methods for each. And so these are my Illustrator models. As you can see, the ears and the legs are separate. And so these are my Illustrator models. As you can see, the ears and the legs are separate, as are the wings, because it makes just one kind of extrusion. But it's quite easy to separate them out in Blender just using something called a boolean, which you can put a cube in between the legs to make it like a cut through, or you can just cut the model in half, extrude it a little bit in the middle, and then use the mirror modifier again to symmetrize or create symmetry for the other side. It sounds complicated. It's not that complicated. And what I really like about these models is just that they're so freaking cute. They're puffy and they straight on one side, puffy on the other. And I just love that roundness. And I really like the eyeballs as well. I just think the way that they kind of puff and bulge looks really good. I think it looks really nice. And then the way that they're inset into the face, I think it works really well for this kind of style. So it might be that I go down this route where I just simply take the Illustrator extrusion and just cut it up a bit so that we have separate, ears, wings, legs, etc. But we'll see. I'm kind of feeling all of the different options. But if you have a particular style that you like, let me know in the comments. I'll bear it in mind as I start to develop the characters. So that's it from me today. Please like and subscribe. I'm trying to get my channel numbers up, and check out my first video that tells the story of how the dragons came to Earth, and let me know what you think in the comments. Goodbye.